Hey there, and welcome to this rather long video on the GHB Party event. Um, there are 12 units here to cover, and I'm dedicating a little bit of time to each one, just to tell you about their stat line, give you ideas on builds, detail their grail costs, and overall help inform you, hopefully, on some potential builds or ideas for these units, and maybe help you decide which Grail project you may want to work on next. Or maybe it's your first Grail project. So I hope you find something useful out of this video. Um, and yeah, without further ado, let's begin. First up, we have Gharnef. Now, Gharnef is a rather cool character with a fairly underrated stat line. He actually benefits from getting a point in HP, attack, and speed for his first merge. His tome that he comes with in Mulu is not very good, as most people probably realise by now. It is very situational, and more so just it's a very inconsistent weapon. It doesn't work all the time, and when it does, it doesn't really help you a ton. Much like Garon's weapon, it's a cool idea with poor or weak execution, really. As far as fodder goes, Ignis is fairly common. Mirror Stance is alright, and Chill Attack's probably the best thing he has, but even so, Chill skills in general I feel are better on Sacred Seals, because you can switch them between characters freely, and they're very good skills for Arena, where you're just looking for support skills in general. But as a beast skill, you're sacrificing, especially as an infantry unit, quite a lot of other more powerful skills. I mean, infantry have access to pretty much everything. Wrath, Null Sea Disrupt, Null Follow Up, all the lull skills. They've got plenty of tools at their disposal, but Chill Attack here is not really worth foddering for. I suppose the only thing he's lacking as a mage is what most mages have, is a res stat that can ploy. Typically you want about 36 res to ploy or higher. 37 tends to be the lowest you want, at plus 10 at least. So he's about, well, if he gets 30 at max merge, then he's still about 6 res behind. So unless you were to give him some skills to boost his res, he's not going to be ploying anything. But his stat line is fairly good. I mean, I'm going to show you this build here now. Here we are. So, it's quite a different build to what you may have expected. Of course, Blade Tome does work very well, and if that's something that is an easier investment for you, then by all means it's just as good, really. But this is a build that tries to take his relatively decent speed stat and his decent bulk and try and utilize as much as you can the bonus stats granted by these skills when you initiate combat. Attack Smoke isn't necessary, but it is a cheap skill that you could throw on. There are plenty of C skills you can run, much like the assist reposition. Those two slots tend to be preferential. The Fox Tome is rather underrated, actually. It rivals the Blade Tome in usability, because while the Blade Tome has more damage overall, the Fox Tomes grant 4 to all stats on initiation for no cost, and unlike Blade Tomes, don't give a penalty to your special cooldown, meaning there are certain things you can do with a Fox Tome on player phase that Blade Tomes actually can't do. This is probably the only inheritable tome in the game that rivals Blade Tomes as an option. So I thought, well, while Blade Tomes tend to focus on Fury Desperation combo, where you lower your HP so you could do burst damage, this build in particular tries to keep your HP high so that you could do lots of damage, have plenty of speed, but also retain your bulk. And with Mirror Impact and Lull Attack res, you're preventing follow-ups, and you're nullifying their res and attack buffs, which gives you an extra 3 def res, essentially, and also an extra 3 damage. But yeah, generally speaking, this build, he hits, 49 speed, plenty of attack, plenty of bulk. A rather solid build overall. I put him as a tier B because I feel like he is well worth the grails if you do invest in him. But the reason why he's not an A rank is because he doesn't really provide anything truly unique that makes him stand out above characters like Tharja. Tharja is a 3 and 4 star unit that has a really solid Pref Tome. She also has a similar stat line. She can run Blade Tome without the penalty in Special, thanks to her weapon refine. She can also perform a semi-support role with her drive debuff, and she doesn't cost any grails. That being said, Gharnef only does cost 1,000 grails if you kept every copy so far, which is rather cheap, comparing him to Tempest trial units who are more often than not worth 2,700 if you're going to plus 10 him. Now some may be wondering, why on earth did I make such a high investment build here? Well, the idea is just to give you some form of basis for inspiration, or an idea that you could aim for if he's one of your favourite characters. Or if you just were curious to see what he could do. Keep in mind that he can also get 10 Dragon Flowers, since he came out quite a while ago, so his stats could go even higher. But the whole point of these max investment builds is to just give you an idea of the sorts of things the character can achieve when you put all the effort into him that you may want to. Though I'm not counting flowers, because this is mostly... The thing about fodder is you could potentially have a lot of it, but flowers are very limited, and there's not much you can do to get more of them, so I just feel like builds are more flexible in that sense. But yeah, that's Gharnef. He's a worthwhile Grail project that you may wish to consider. But yeah, that's all I really have to say about Gharnef. Next up we have Fallen Delthea. Now Fallen Delthea is quite a popular Grail project that I've seen quite a few times, both online and in game. She has a rather solid stat line, is a fan favourite character. It's part of the Fallen Heroes event, which always gets a lot of love. I, for one, love the Fallen Heroes banners. I think they're some of the coolest and memorable banners that we get, with quite a variety of different characters and new concepts they tend to introduce with them. But Fallen Delthea here has HP attack speed as her first merge, which is quite nice, although a bit of def would have been nice. The thing is, the main problem with Delthea is that she falls into a rather common category, much like Gharnef, which is the infantry mage that has attack and speed, a bit of res, and not much def. Gharnef has more balanced bulk, which does set him apart, but what sets Delthea apart is the fact that she has almost a 5-star exclusive stat line in a free unit. What I mean by this is, it's not too different to characters like Base Lind, who is a 5-star exclusive. She's got very good offenses and plays a good glass cannon role. That being said, she still ranks the same as Gharnef for me, because she is a worthwhile unit that doesn't bring too much brand new to the table. Death is an okay weapon. The thing is though, when the blue Fox Tome comes out, that will essentially just be a better version of Death. You don't get a mixed phase Fortal stats, but you don't get recoil. Now recoil is pretty nice if you're running something like it anyway, because with Desperation of course you can run a burst damage set. But the set I went with, as you can see here, is, well, it's a Blade Tome at the moment, but I would most likely change to a Fox Tome when that comes out. But this one, much like Gharnef, preserves the bulk and allows you not only to be a cannon, but to be, made of something, so you can survive multiple battles. Again, Repo and Attack Smoke are standard, but changeable. They're not really... C skills can be, as can the assist, but in this case they're quite interchangeable. Sturdy Impact to balance your bulk. Sturdy Blow is probably to be replaced with Mirror Strike when that comes out. It doesn't exist yet, so I went with Sturdy Blow. Lull attack speed to help your attack and speed, well, help your bulk more so, and to help your speed. Your speed hits 41, which with a buff is 47, if we're considering the lull, and 47 is typically the optimal speed stat. Because anything that's too fast to double you typically one-shot, especially when investing this much into your attack stat, especially if you're a Blade Tome. But anything that you're fast enough to double, you'll probably need to hit twice. Although, again, Blade Tomes are Blade Tomes, they'll deal loads of damage. I know I said I wanted to go with rather unique builds, but these first few characters are quite hard to innovate unless you go with the whole close counter attack death bond set, or whether you go with the blade tome. So you can either use blade tome or a fox tome. Fox tome would also synergize really well with this kit, and in a way better. I mean, blade tomes are often very good with the Fury Desperation. But yes, I didn't actually say anything about her fodder. Death Blow is quite alright, but that already comes on a 4-star climb. Even Attack Wave seems okay, but I personally don't like even and odd skills at all, none of them. They're way too inconsistent for my liking. I prefer to have something that works when you need it to, rather than having to wait a turn to make it work, because in many modes in the game, especially Aether Age, you just don't have that freedom of choice with turns. The only thing I could see being manipulated well is the duo Hector-Lilina unit, because on the odd turn you just smite them in with Mordecai and they can wipe a whole team in one turn. But typically, even an odd wave skill's not a fan. Glacies is rather common and, well, you can't inherit death, so that's not exactly the best fodder. But as a unit, she's solid, and at a low grail cost of 1,350, which is probably as cheap as you'll ever get, it's quite decent, quite worth it. She would be rated higher, but as I said, there is a lot of competition, like Odin. Odin's actually rather decent now with his pref. But if you're looking for just a solid blue mage to stand the test of time, Brunja is also a grail project. She costs exactly twice as much, at 2,700 if you kept both copies that she originally came out. But she is, in my opinion, 10 times better of a unit. And not just because of her tome, but her stat line is incredible. Just the right amount of speed, just the right amount of attack and res. Salvageable death points. Brunja is easily one of the best grail projects in the entire game. At least that's what I think. So with that all said and done, is there anything else to say? No, I don't think so. That's Delthea for you. Alright then, moving on to Julius now. Julius is the first C rank character that I'm going through here. It's not that he's necessarily a bad unit. I mean, when you see the build in a second, you'll see that he can be used to a rather decent standard. But the reason why he's a C tier is typically because Gharnef and other red mages will just do what he does better, and also his tome is a little shaky, which has quite a strong drawback, being the dragon effectiveness, and there are so many dragon counters out there now. There's so many. So with that being considered, let's have a look at his stat line then. So rather low speed, though that isn't the reason necessarily that he is considered a C rank. C rank units are rank units that I consider worse than alternatives that you could go for, both in the Grail and in the 3 and 4 star pool. But I'll get more onto that in a minute. His attack stat is alright, his HP is okay, it's a little low. His speed's a little low, but it is salvageable. His def is very low, and his res is just fine. If you were to take 4 points of res, put it in def, and then, I don't know, move it around a little bit, you'd end up with something like Gharnef. But generally speaking, his stat line has not aged very well. Now, if we take a look at the fodder he has, he's got Draconic Aura, which isn't that rare. He's got Guard, which again isn't too rare. It's a 5-star Titania away, you know. And then he's got Attack Ploy, which is rather nice. I think Attack Ploy is what he has at 4-star, though I might be wrong. But Attack Ploy is very good fodder. Any unit with high enough res to ploy should consider, well, ploying, because it's a very, very good debuff option. Ploys in general, just attack ploy, speed ploy, etc., are, in my opinion, some of the best debuffing skills. Because unlike chills, you have the freedom of cherry picking your targets if you line them up right. Of course, you're still relying on enemy movement, but on some maps the enemies don't move until you approach, and on some maps you get to swap around your units before you start. There are ways around it, but typically it's easier to aim ploys than it is chills. But yeah, it's a good fodder. He gets HP attack res in his first merge, which is a bit sad, since his res is already a bit overkill anyway. I would have preferred a speed or def, just to give him a bit more to work with, especially speed, though his def is incredibly low, which for a mage is trouble when going up against dragons, who adaptive damage. I'm not sure if his tome takes that away or not, but still. He only costs 1,000 grails, which is rather cheap. This is if you've kept all copies, of course. If not, it'll go up. But it's a rather cheap project to make if you like him. Again, if you like any of these characters, just go for it. It doesn't matter whether they're good or not at that point. If you love the character, you should just do it. Every character can be made good. You just have to invest the right amount. Speaking of investment, here's the build. Again, really expensive skills. Fox Tome is only available on Hubert, I'm pretty sure. Sturdy Impact and Lull Speed Res are not exactly common either. But the purpose of this build is to, once again, like the previous two characters, don't worry, the next one's different, is to utilise the player phase buffs you gain from these skills, and utilise the speed, and make him quite good on player phase, really. Again, rivaling Blade Tomes, which of course is another option for him. The only problem with a Blade Tome is you won't be able to use his speed quite so well unless you run something like Life and Death 4 or Fury 4 or something, because you won't have the 4 speed from the Fox Tome. With this build, you reach 48 speed on player phase, I'm fairly certain, if we're considering the lull debuff. So you're effectively at 47, and what was that, 47 or was it 48? 48. 48 is pretty much optimal speed. So you'll be doubling the things you need to double, one-shotting the things that you don't need to double. Because thing is, when you got 58 attack with a buff, and then you got 68, 72 attack, you're going to be hitting a lot of things very hard. And if Dragonic Aura is proccing, then you're going to one-shot them anyway. So it's a case of balancing your bulk and having enough speed to double what you need to, but not overkilling speed to the point where your attack's lacking or your bulk has weaknesses. Balancing your bulk is very good. One thing he does have, of course, is that res stat, so the attack ploy will be very consistent. Anything that hits 40 or higher will be good. And then, of course, the flowers, he gets 10, so there are even more ways of boosting that speed up to a more valuable. I mean, if you use Dragon Flowers, you actually have to run the lull to hit 47 speed. You could run something else, like Special Spiral or anything, really. So there's plenty of things you can do with Julius. I just feel like there are other units that do what he does better. I think Gharnef typically runs this type of build better, and I think Tharja runs a Blade Tome better. You know, there's always another unit to compare with the infantry mages, so see what you can do with him. But that's all I really have to say about Julius. Next up, we have Kempf, and Kempf is going to be built rather differently to the last three, don't worry. So, Kempf is one of the weird choices for this, as he hasn't actually had his revival yet. So, just jumping into the whole Grail cost now, he only costs 1,750, but when his revival comes, he will drop down even further to 1,350. Now, Kempf I consider a C tier rank, because while his weapon provides him with a really good niche, or like something that really does differentiate him from the rest, his niche isn't as strong as other characters' niches. In other words, if you have an Ares or a base Eliwood, they will fill the sword cav role in a stronger way than Kempf does when concerning gimmicks. In other words, the Special Spiral Dark Mistletoe type thing with Vantage Bonfire is really strong on Ares' behalf. Gale Force is really strong on Blazing Durandal Eliwood. And then Kempf's Savage Blow Poison Strike technique type thing isn't really as strong. And as such, especially as a Grails project, to me just doesn't seem as quite as worth it. However, if you do like the character, and you do indeed want to build him, you're not left with nothing to work with. You do have a weapon that does something unique. You are creating a unit that does something cool. So, with that being said, let's have a look at his stats. So, kind of lame stats at base, but at merged up to +10, he can salvage speed. It is a shame that he gets death rather than speed as the second point, or the third point on his merge extra. He gets HP attack death rather than HP attack speed, which would be nicer. The death is helpful, but speed would certainly have been easier for builds. He has basically no fodder. All three of the skills, Aegis, Fortress Res, and Savage Blow, are all available on 3 and 4 star units, I'm fairly certain. And none of them are particularly good either. So, Savage Blow's good, it's situational, but Aegis and Fortress Res 3 are probably never ever used by anyone. So, how on earth would you go about building this man? Well, going over to this max investment build, you can see the Grail's cost there if you looking for a visual. The build here involves Fury. What this means is the idea is to attack, get hit again because you've got enough speed, and by doing so you drop your HP enough that someone can Wings of Mercy in and finish them off. This is designed to take out really difficult threats, perhaps someone like Winter Sophis, because regardless of whether you proc Gale Force, which is kind of the point anyway, but even if you don't proc Gale Force because of Special Fighter, you should be able to have an ally come in and deal the finishing blow, especially if you are using his pref. If you do get to proc Gale Force, it means you can either go after someone else and potentially kill them, or deal some more Savage Blow, Poison Strikey damage elsewhere. It allows you to also retreat as well. You just have lots of options. Fury 4 isn't necessary, but if you have access to it, it's clearly better than Fury 3, especially since it gets you into that Wings of Mercy range a lot more reliably, especially since you need to take damage, but you also don't want to die, so you've got to have a good balance of bulk and Wings of Mercy range. It's not the only way to build him, but it's a relatively easy build to do. The only fodder you need are Gale Force and Lull Attack Speed, or some form of Lull Speed something. The Lull Attack helps with Heavy Blade, but also not doing too much damage that you kill, because, again, with Gale Force, if you're going to proc Gale Force, you need to hit them twice. Whereas if you kill them in one hit, you're not going to proc Gale Force, so it's good to have a nice balance of attack that's high enough for Heavy Blade, but not too high that you're dealing too much damage, which is probably the only scenario in the game where dealing too much damage is a bad thing. Gale Force. But yes, as a C rank, I wouldn't recommend building him and merging him unless you really like him. If you really like him, go ahead. But as far as tier placement concerned, he has a cool niche, but it's not enough to separate him from characters such as Ares and Eliwood, who kind of have their own thing that is much more effective and consistent, really, because it's a very odd, gimmicky niche that is not going to be useful everywhere. So, depending on that, build him as you will. Alright, now we have Rutger, a unit that is used by quite a lot of people. As a fan favourite character, it's sad to see him as, at least by my opinion, be a C rank. The thing is, Rutger is a solid unit. He's got a good stat line, good BST, good stat line. He's one of the more recent GHBs, coming out about a year ago, which is still fairly recent, considering he's not a Gen 1 or 2 unit. He's got Gen 3 BST, he's got good stat line. The biggest issue Rutger has is that, like Lance Flyers, and in some ways those infantry mages that we saw earlier, Rutger has so much competition, like so much. I think about it this way. From a 3 and 4 star only perspective, including GHBs, if you want Special Spiral and AoE specials, Navarre's your dude. He's got a quick and pulse weapon, which combo with Special Spiral could be a really effective AoE buster. Not the best in the world, but better than Rutger could ever be. If you want Gale Force, Longku kind of gets the job done. He's like a Red Raven. Not as good as Raven, but he's great. He's got the Life and Death Slaying Edge weapon. Gale Force is his thing. If you want burst damage on either phase with Distant Counter Wrath, sort of Ira situation, Ira Lasse, Fur exists with Nameless Blade, comboed with Wrath and Distant Counter, means 20 true damage proc on Moonbow, dual phase, 1 cooldown, gets the job done. Rutger, more BST, but because he doesn't have the weapon, he's not going to be as effective. Doesn't matter if his stats are better. Fur is still much more effective and costs no grails. Yes, of course you have to rely on picking 11 copies of Fur, but come on, the game's been out 3 years, and if you're a new player, don't worry. The copies of characters will come rolling in very soon. Like, you'll end up with 15 of the same character very quickly once you start summoning those same colours over and over again. Give it a year, right, and you'll have 11 of every character, more or less. I mean, you'll have to do cleanup and stuff, but generally speaking, it's easy to get a 3 and 4 star to plus 10 after a certain amount of time. So he gets HP attack speed, which is rather nice. To be honest, he's got enough speed. He didn't really need it. A point extra in res would have balanced his def and res quite well with a refined weapon in res, but it doesn't matter. He has good offenses, relatively decent bulk. He pretty much has the Iris stat line, just without Regnalastra or a pref that sets him apart. That's his biggest problem and why he's a C rank. Looking at his kit, Slaying Edge is fairly common, Vengeance is common, Vantage is common, but Attack Def Bond is actually something worth looking into. It's not Attack Def Bond 4, which will come out at some point, but it is still a relatively decent A-slot skill for some characters. I don't know if he's worth foddering, really, because he's a good one-off unit every now and then, and he's quite cool, but if you're looking for Attack Def Bond, it's there. Rutger has it. But I wouldn't use it on a Rutger build. But how would you build Rutger? Well, looking at this here, you're probably thinking, what is that? Well, this is what I consider to be something that Rutger can do well, I suppose. His grail cost is 1,350. This is the first bonus copy, I consider. In other words, a copy given that isn't a revival or the base 3. The first bonus copy of Rutger. So it's 1,350 grails. This max investment build doesn't try to be something that other 3 and 4 stars can replicate to a better standard. I mean, you'll probably get similar with Fur, who has Woedao but also Slaying Edge at the same time. The idea here was to work off the fact that he has pretty decent stats all round. So a bonus doubler, you can just become a big stat vomit bot, kind of like Fallen Corrin but red, and a sword and without a pref. But with close call and stuff, you got 56 speed with the bonus doubler, which is way overkill, but it works well with close call. Your attack goes up to 63, and you can work out the rest. It's quite, what is that, 45 def. And with the threat and attack def, you're going to be doing more damage when a character's close to you. The idea is that you get hit back proc Luna, which again with Woedao will deal massive damage. He is definitely a unit that can perform well. He's not a bad unit, but the tier ranking is based on whether or not you can get similar or better value out of something else that's readily available. And Fur, Lonku, Navarre, these are all readily available units. Even if you're new to the game, you can get 3 copies of Navarre straight up. Rutger, you have to be around at the right time, otherwise the battle's not there and you can't get him. And then you're spending 3,700 grails to get all 11 flat out, which takes a very long time, even for someone at the end game. So it's worth considering these things. But yeah, quite long, but that's the section on Rutger, really. Okay, next we have Linus. So Linus is often regarded as a slightly better Raven, which in most cases, yeah, that's kind of the case. He's got decent fodder with Drive Def 2, Brazen Attack Speed, which is still rather hard to get hold of, and then Luna is a bonus, I suppose. You could always inherit that with one of the other skills. He unlocks Drive Def at 4 star, I believe, and then the Brazen comes at 5 star, although it is worth the feathers on some units. I find that Brazen Attack Speed and Brazen Attack Speed 4, if you ever get a Walt, are particularly good on brave weapons. So weapons that take away your speed for the double hit, because the thing is, 10 speed sounds great, but it's overkill on most units. You surpass that 47. Whereas on Brave Bow and Brave Sword or whatever, 10 speed can be pretty decent. It's getting rid of the 5 penalty and then adding another 5 on top. So the Brazen's rather nice. As far as his stat line goes, he's got really decent speed stat, which goes up with the first merge. So he gets 38 at max, which is brilliant stat, really. His weapon has a decent refine, and he's one of the only GHBs to get a refine so quickly after release. He's very lucky in that regard, that he shared weapon with Raven, which is a rather good weapon. It's like Lonku's, but better because it's on a better stat line for it. His best builds typically are Gale Force or Soul or Luna. He can run a variety of different things, hence why he's a B rank. He's not A rank because he doesn't bring something completely unique, but he is worth the Grail investment because he is a solid unit that can run a variety of builds. Okay, his lowest Grail cost is 1,000 at the moment. This is his second bonus copy. He's had his revival, and he had it was either last summer or the Elite Quest that he got his bonus copy, and this is yet another one. So it's rather nice to see him get another, so you can have an even easier time merging him if you wanted to. His obvious comparison is Raven, who, from this build here, Raven can run something similar. But this is just an idea that retains bulk, much like the previous characters. You could see a trend with the sort of builds that I do and my playstyle. But of course, feel free to build him however you will. This is just ideas. But there isn't much else to say. I've explained most other things on the previous characters, so that's Linus for you. Here we have a rather fan-favourite character, Lyon. He is a C tier rank, but don't let that put you off too much. He is likely to get a refine before long. But the reason why he's a C rank, of course, is because Julius and Gharnef alone do more than he does most of the time. His pref is probably one of the least good out of all the mages on this event, purely because it's just a Raven tome, really, and Raven tomes have not aged well. Ever since the era of Takumi ended back in 2017, they haven't really had a place, with most meta colourless units now being a lot better off, even if the Raven tome has the advantage. They'll still win most matchups, and the Raven tome will still lose, especially if you're using something like Bravebow Jamk. Jamk typically does not care about TA Raven tome. So what can you do with Lyon that you can't do with other characters? Well, the answer is not very much. But I'll get onto his build in a second. He gets attack res as his first merge, which is welcome, but nothing crazy. It allows him to ploy effectively, which is nice. But that's about all it does for him. His kit is dated because, of course, he came out a little while ago. Attack res 2 is okay. It's better as a seal, since you've got so many options for your A slot. Vengeance is common, and drive, that's res, isn't it? Drive res is relatively common too. I think you can get it on a 4-star Soleil, so he doesn't really have anything for fodder, which might mean it's worth keeping him in case he gets a really good refine, because who knows, he might get effective against colourless or something crazy. Calling it now. Effective against colourless with an Owl Tome sub-effect. Can you imagine that? Anyways, moving on to his actual build, you can see the Grail cost for him is 1,000 currently, if you've kept all copies. And he is rather decent if you were to build him in this Owl Tome setting, because he's got a stat line that kind of goes well with it. Typically you'd want to run a quick riposte rather than all this speed buffing, but I thought I'd come up with something a little bit more unique. I mean, with this, he hits, 36, 41... he hits exactly 47 if he's got all 3 allies present. And even though that's quite hard to set up, if you are to give him Dragon Flowers, that's an extra 2 speed. It means you only need to have 2 people next to him to hit 47 speed. And of course you're getting the stats in all the other bits as well. So you got attack, you got some bulk from the lull skill, reducing the opponent's attack stats. You've actually got quite a solid build there. Iceberg could be interchangeable. There's a lot of things you can do. But Altome's typically the sort of thing you want to go for on a low speed unit like him. Because the bond skill is quite an easy way to boost your speed, as is Altome, so you do have options for speed. But yeah, that's all I really have to say about Lyon. He is alright if you invested in him, but there are just other units. I mean, if we look at the 3 and 4 star pool, you've got Tharja, which is really hard to compete with. Henry's already a Raven Tome with a Refine, a pretty decent Refine. It's just his stat line lets him down. Though he does have good bulk, so with Lyon, unless you run this build or something or other, unless you invest in him a lot, basically, he's not going to bring too much for you, unless you really like the character, of course. If you were going to use his tome, then you may as well run the generic TA Raven Tome build, but it depends if it's worth it for you. But yeah, as far as whether or not he's worth it, he's a C rank for me, but again, if you like him, go for it. Now for another B rank unit. This is Naesala. This is a very commonly seen unit in Ether raids, because he's a very good Gale Force unit. Potentially 3 movement as a flyer is a very powerful thing to behold. As far as this base kit is concerned, he has Swift Sparrow, Guard and Blazing Wind, all very good fodders. But is he worth keeping? Well, as a tier rank B, I consider him certainly worth building. The difference is, while he does have his uniqueness, right? He's not an A rank because there are 3 and 4 star units like Katria and Est and Cordelia who are Lance Flyers. And I believe Shigure has a very similar stat line. So if Shigure was to ever get a really good refine, then you can see where this is going. His niche is the 3 movement, which is pretty much what he has. His weapon is rather decent. It's the only weapon option he has. He gets attack and speed as his first merge. And I'll go back to the 3 and 4 star thing. The thing is, Katria and Est and Cordelia all have weapons that could potentially quad, hit 4 times in a row. Damage wise, they'll be superior most of the time. And as a Gale Force unit, while 3 movement spaces is rather nice, cavalry units are always 3 spaces. They don't require the same level of investment. If you were to use something like Perry, who is a Lance Cav unit, she has a weapon that's practically designed for Gale Force sets. So she is going to be no Grail cost to you, and she's rather decent. Very cheap unit. So he's a B rank because he is very effective at what he does. But he's not an A rank because there are 3 and 4 star heroes that are almost equally worth doing, and having them almost completely, just stops you needing Naesala at all, really. He's not a must-have in that sense. He's not bringing much new. Moving on to his build, he is 1,350 now, which is usually the maximum, not maximum, usually is as low as you can get. Most units get the 3 from the initial battle, then they get their revival, and then they get 1 bonus copy one way or another. Every single character up to Gharnef has had this, if they're a Grand Hero battle. So 1,350 is likely the cheapest you'll ever get. I've put Sturdy Impact here because, of course, as a flyer, it's one of his best options. It goes really well with Gale Force because he's got plenty of speed already. You don't need to boost it anymore with Swift Sparrow. Once you've got the merges, at least, your speed's fine. And with his flowers, you'll actually hit 47 at base, which means you'll have great speed without even needing the buffs, which is quite important for a Gale Force unit. Again, you don't want to push his attack too high. He'll hit 63 with a buff, which is all you really need. I can't remember if his weapon buffs stats or not, but it doesn't really matter. It's enough to proc Heavy Blade, and it's not too much damage. And as a blue unit, he's not going to be doing loads anyway, because most of the meta's green, or just high def anyway, so he's going to be a really solid Gale Force unit, and that's how most people use him. That's why I put this build here. So yeah, this is how I build Naesala. Would I recommend, if you like him, to build him and merge him? Yes. Definitely not the highest priority if you've got others, but easily one that is worthwhile and you would not regret doing. Unless, of course, a new character came out and you wish you saved Grails for them, but you won't regret him from the point of view of his utility and what he brings to the table, because he is rather unique as a beast and someone that has 3 movement effectively as a flyer, which grants him quite superior he has quite superior mobility in that sense. Yes. But yeah, that's it for Naesala, I think. Ah, yes. Oliver. Easily one of the best characters in the entire game. No, Jacob. Well, he is certainly worth it. even though he doesn't look it, with merges he can pull his weight rather well. Um, he's better than most people think. He's not crazy good, but he is certainly a unit that's worth looking into if you've got plenty of copies, which they've certainly given us a few. As far as his stat line is concerned, his speed is notably low, his def is notably lowish, his HP is okay for a mage, and his res is rather nice. He gets HP attack res, as you can see from his first merge, which means that with merges he will have a reliable res stat for ploying. It does come with a ploy skill, which is nice. The weapon he comes with, Shine, is practically useless. You'll want to swap this out for just about anything else in the pool as a blue tome, because having a weapon with no effect is never usually a very good choice in this game. It may be different in another game, but in this game certainly not. You need some kind of effect to synergize with your kit. So Shine's not going to be very good. Don't fodder it for Shine or anything like that. It's not a good weapon. Not in my opinion, but objectively it's more of a handicap weapon than anything else. Blazing Light is good, but Blazing Wind is better. I wouldn't fodder him for this, as there are other AoE specials that are more effective. Blazing Light already comes on Ophelia anyway, if you're looking for something for her. And then, if you're going to give someone an AoE special, Blazing Wind is likely a better option. Mirror Strike is nice, but Mirror Impact is what you want, so there's not really much of a point foddering him off for Mirror Strike. I mean, if it's for a character with high res, then you should be using Sturdy Blow anyway. And if it's a character with high def, low res, then I don't know if it's worth Mirror Strike. It's not a big boost to res. Usually characters with a low res stat have a low res stat, you know, like 18, 19, and with merges, 22, 23? Mirror Strike is not going to fix that. Mirror Impact will, because it's 10 res. But 4 res is not going to make a big difference on player phase. It just won't. So I wouldn't forward Mirror Strike. Attack Ploy, on the other hand, is certainly worth looking into as a fodder option. There are plenty of GHBs that come with Attack Ploy. In fact, Julius was earlier in this event. So you've got more than one Attack Ploy fodder available readily. If you're going to fodder Oliver, that would be what it would be for. However, I don't think it's worth foddering Oliver, and here's why. So, if you've kept every copy of Oliver so far, yes, it will only cost you 700 grails. That's not very long. 700 grails is nothing, really. You could do them as a side project. I used one copy of Oliver for Mirror Strike on my Felicia, and I regret it to this day, because Felicia doesn't need Mirror Strike, and I need that Oliver. So my Oliver's going to cost 1,000 now, but I will do him at some point. The build here tries to balance def and res as much as it can. It uses quick repose, close counter, owl tome. You can see it's a generic owl tome build, but the reason why Oliver's a B rank is because he runs it very well. He's got a decent HP stat, decent def, decent res that ploys, which is important. And although this build in particular hasn't aged very well, I feel like if Oliver ever got a refine that gave him an owl tome effect, he could be a really decent option for a Grail project, especially one this cheap. As a bit of a joke, I did a second build for Oliver, which, as you can see here, uses his rather low speed stat on player phase to be something a little bit more interesting. It's very high investment in comparison, although close counter's not exactly cheap. But this build will be a lot less consistent, but in some ways a lot more fun. So if you ever, plus 10 Oliver, really like him and really want to play with his stat line and make him a meme unit, then this is probably the way to go. But yeah, that's just more of a joke build there. It does work though. He reaches, I believe, about 47 speed, so it's worth the try if you ever want to. If you ever want to give it a go. I did edit in the Blah Fox there, using the custom unit builder as well, because that tome isn't actually out yet. But I felt like making it because it would work well, somewhat, if it became a reality on this build. So yeah, that's Oliver. Now for probably one of the more popular characters on this event, Aversa. Now, I was surprised to see Aversa because she was another unit that was featured on last summer's GHB Party event. And she is the only A rank tier character on this event for me, because as most current players know, Aversa is quite a versatile unit with a decent stat line. As you can see, she's got a good speed on her. A rest stat doesn't quite ploy, but is still relatively decent. Her death is probably her biggest weakness, and she's got a rather good HP stat, which does work well with her weapon. Weapon being Aversa's Knight, inflicts panic, and -3 to all stats on all enemy units that are adjacent to another ally who have less HP than her. In other words, any enemies that are with a lower HP than yourself, which is most of them, who stand next to another ally will be panicked and debuffed at the same time, which is really useful in modes like Ether Raids, where most units are clumped together and there's multiple, so you've got lots of utility there. Dragon Fang and Odd Res Wave are pretty rubbish fodder. Dragon Fang because it's common in 3 and 4 star units, and Odd Res Wave, you know how I feel about wave skills, inconsistent, and I don't like them. HP Speed 2 is rather nice, best used on Aversa. So there you go, she comes with it. Iago might be able to use it well if you invest in his speed, but it depends. She gets HP attack speed as her first merge, which is ideal. Solid stat line, solid character. Let's see what build we can come up with that's really inventive and unique. Well, there it is. Aerobatics Guidance, double HP skill, Aversa's Knight. Now, this is probably the least interesting build of the bunch, even though this is probably the best character here. And that's because her niche is just the character in general. There are barely any free-to-play tome or magic flyer units, and her tome is a really unique one, only really compared to Iago, whose tome works in a different way anyway. An odd-even effect, which is inconsistent, while Aversa is much more consistent. That being said, Iago's still an A-tier character because he's got a very effective tome. You know, if you can put it to use. He's also got a really good stat line, but he's not on this event. So, going back to Aversa here, she does cost 1,000 grails because she's been given out a bonus twice now past her revival. And really, if you're interested at all, or if you just want to make quick progress in the game, Aversa is a really good Grail project to focus on. She is very decent, you know, just boost her HP. She's got 41 speed there, which is optimal with the buff. The panic and debuff will help your speed anyway if it's too slow, so she's not going to panic everyone, but with 55 HP, she'll be panicking a good bunch of them. And keeping enemies close together isn't very difficult either, unless it's like a cavalry team, in which case you'll probably won't have much trouble anyway, because most cav units have low res or aren't particularly difficult to take care of on player phase. But yeah, that's Aversa really. Not much else to be said. Decent unit, best one in this event in my opinion, and if you're interested at all, she's certainly worthwhile doing. Here we have King Garon, who has probably some of the coolest artwork and sprite in the whole game. He looks very cool. However, his stat line is not so cool, as it looks rather good until you compare it to Adult Tiki, who has more or less the same kind of stat line. But to top it off, rather than Breath of Blight, which is in my opinion a rather bad weapon, much like Gharnef, it's got a cool gimmick, but it's not one that does very much for you, and you're better off replacing it with something like Lightning Breath, like most dragons run. His speed stat isn't that great. His attack stat's alright, and his bulk's very nice. Mixed bulk, that's always appreciated. And his fodder is rather basic, besides Panic Ploy, which is rather good. Distant Death is okay, but it's not aged particularly well over the years. It's become less and less useful over time. You're better off using Fort Death Res 3 if you can find it on a cliff. Not on the character cliff, and you can get a combat manual of him from the Divine Codes if you ever get enough. I'm not sure if anyone will ever get 6,000, but maybe in a year's time. I don't know. But the rest of his fodder, Dragon Fang's quite common. Panic Ploy is actually quite decent, but not on Garon. He doesn't really have the HP for it. Usually you'll be putting Panic Ploy on army units since they tend to hit higher HP stats, especially with refined weapons. So that might be something to look into. His first merge is HP attack def, which is a little sad because if it was res, he'd have a balanced def res. But alas, it is not. It would have also been nice if he had a little bit more speed to work with, but again, it's not something that he can really do. He's a C tier rank because Adult Tiki is arguably a better unit and cheaper, so that's pretty much all there is to it, really. I mean, if you're looking for decent red dragons, there's also Bantu can run a speed stat quite shakily, but it works. And then if you ever invest into 5-star units, there's plenty of red dragons there, aren't there? So I wouldn't say he's worth it, but if you do invest in him, you may be able to get something out of it. His grail cost is 1,000 if you kept every copy. Much like Aversa, this is his second bonus copy, meaning that he is now at 1,000 cost. The build I went for here was trying to balance bulk as much as I could, while having distant counter and a guard effect and a ploy, and of course quick riposte, since his speed is really difficult to make use of. You could go with steady posture, but then he's got a lot of def. It's a bit hard to mix up his def and res while keeping his res high enough to ploy. So this is what I came up with in the end. It's not the greatest build in the world. Bonus doubler does work quite nice on him because you could actually run speed at that point. So depending on how you want to build him, there's a lot you can do. He also gets the 10 dragon flowers since he came out a while back, so there's that too. I would not recommend investing in him until he gets a refine, because a refine on Breath of Blight might fix the weapon quite well. He is from Fire Emblem Fates, so it's quite likely he'll get treated well. Not to say there's much bias, but looking at Laszlo and then looking at Base Leaf, there's a little bit of bias towards certain games, but I won't go too far into that. Looking at Garon himself, he could be quite effective when invested in, but otherwise I'd just hold fire for now. 1,000 grails is very cheap, so if you have kept every copy, it might be worth keeping them all until they're refined, just in case he gets something rather fun or rather good. But yeah, that's pretty much all there is to say on him. And then, last but not least, we have the Death Knight from Fire Emblem Three Houses. So his Scythe grants him +4 to all stats, and prevents the opponent's follow-up attack if the opponent has a buff or some kind of movement increase property on them. He has cooldown -1 as the base effect, which is really nice as well, which is a rather solid weapon overall. This allows him to ascend to the rank of B, because while he isn't something that is incredibly good, he is a character that has something rather unique for himself, and with investment will bring quite a good deal of value to you, something that other characters can't really replicate on the same level. He comes with Blazing Flame, which is not that great. It's a fun skill, but it's not necessarily a very good one. Escape Route is rather common. Blazing Flame's kind of common anyway. And Close Guard is not common, but not great either. Like Close and Distant Defense, has not aged well as time has gone on. Why run Close Guard when Drive Def will get the job done most of the time, since most close range foes will be hitting your def, and Drive Def can be on either phase. So it does it depends what you're going for there, but fodder-wise there's nothing really to write home about. His stat line is okay. I wish he got HP attack speed, but he got HP attack def instead. Def will be useful, but man, would speed just be better. His grail cost is 1,350. This is his first bonus copy that we've got past his revival. He is a really cool looking unit, isn't he? The build I went for here was inspired by Fearless J's one, although to be honest it is mostly just the typical Heavy Blade Desperation Gale Force set, as he has the Slaying weapon, which makes Gale Force a 4 cooldown. It's usually good to run Desperation. There are multiple options you can do. I ran Brazen Attack Speed 4 on him here because um, it puts him up to a really solid 49 speed when buffed, which is really nice. With Desperation, will pretty much double everything and Gale Force things. He has to kind of bait first so that he can take damage, or use Ardent Sacrifice, which in a way is kind of true to his character, you know? He stays still, and then when you attack him, he starts wrecking everything. So you could think of it that way, as an inspiration for this build. But this is mostly just the same build that Fearless J used on his channel, but he did recommend something along the lines of an Ardent Sacrifice Brazen build. So here it is visualized and realized. So hopefully that gives you some form of information on Death Knight. There isn't too much else to be said for him, really. The comparison mainly would be to Perry, since she is a Lance Cav with a slaying weapon that grants 4 tool stats under a condition, which is rather similar, and she does have a better speed stat. But the reason why he's a B rank is because he does have something unique to him in his weapon. It's a different condition, it does prevent follow-up attacks, and he does have higher BST if you look at it that way, higher bulk. So it really does depend on how much you like the dude. He's not the highest B tier, but he is certainly worth it if you do invest. He's not going to be someone that you bench after 10 seconds of using because it's fun and then never come back to. He'll be someone that you can use in many places in the game. Very good character. Here's a little look at the tier list. They're not particularly spread out. They're in order of how they appear on this event within tiers. I'll just quickly reiterate how the tier system is not something that is particularly serious or objective factual. This is just how I feel about each unit's worth. C tier units are characters I feel like are replicated and in many ways surpassed by existing free-to-play or 3 and 4 star summonable units that kind of do their job better. B rank are characters that have something unique to them that I feel sets them apart. So if you invest in them, you'll get some form of unique character that does do the job rather well, whether it be for their weapon or their stat line or a certain gimmick. And then A tier, Aversa there, above and beyond most free characters that you ever get, as a unit that is quite versatile, can run a Blade Tome as well, I forgot to mention, though every mage can run a Blade Tome, but she's got a good speed stat for it. She's got a very good pref weapon, and overall I'd say she's probably the best unit out of this event. If I had to go for a runner-up, I'd say it'd probably be either Naesala or Linus. But yeah, that's all there really is to say about the tier rankings. It's quite a visual thing, so feel free to refer to it at any time if you just wanted a bit of an idea of who to go for next, or you wanted to see out of the two you thought of who might be a better option. But yeah, that's all there really is for this event. Well, I say that's all. It's a rather long video. I hope it wasn't too boring if you decided to watch it all. But yeah, that's it on the 12 GHB Party units. I hope you found this video somewhat informative, or it opened your eyes to builds or uses of these characters you hadn't thought of before. And I will see you in the next video. If you summon any time before my next video, or any time really, I do wish you the best of luck on that. And if you're saving orbs when the time comes, I hope that your luck was worth the effort saving, because I know what it's like to save for ages and not get what you want. So I hope you get what you want, because this game is ruthless sometimes, and saving orbs isn't always gonna pay off. So yeah, with that all said and done, I hope you got all the units from this event. Phoenix Master is really good if you're struggling. I know it's already halfway through the event now, but if you ever need help, Phoenix Master is really good for that. If you're ever looking for more build ideas, Fearless J is a channel I really recommend for any character. He makes videos on every banner that ever releases, so he's definitely your best build option, your best person for builds. But yes, I'll see you in the next video. Stay safe. Have a good one, guys. I'll see you later.